Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. It is the 1st of December, 2024. It's great to have you here with us. We are, of course, working with the holiday-themed headphones again today from Biodynamic. Let's head on over to the agenda. And first of all, I hope everybody's doing well out there, staying warm for those in the Northern Hemisphere, cool for those in the Southern. For today, we're going to take a look at how I would approach dialogue post-production for in DaVinci Resolve. And I'm not going to stick strictly to the effects that are built into DaVinci Resolve. I'm going to pull out some of my own, some of the ones that I usually turn to when I'm trying to post-process. And you can do everything that we're going to do here today in DaVinci Resolve, but I can get generally faster results with some of the other plugins that I use too. So we'll take a look at those. And none of this is sponsored. Well, it is sponsored by Learn, Light, and Sound by us. So, but it's not sponsored by any other company out there. As always, there's a workshop that goes along with our courses over at school.learnlightandsound.com. And we'll also have some Q&A, some questions that were submitted ahead of time. And in fact, I think I'm going to start with the questions this week, kind of mix it up a little bit, because several of the questions will be answered as we do our demo. So let me just jump into those really quickly here. And first up is from Dan. Dan says, will you be touching on managing adjusting audio levels for isolated audio tracks that were recorded either through different mics, i.e. even two DJI Mic 2s that somehow had vastly different recorded levels with the same settings, and in another case with an online interview where the separate tracks had one much lower than the other, or one was distorted and the other wasn't? Dan, yes, we will. We will show you exactly how I would approach that. Fixing the distortion is a little bit of a different issue, and I would probably need to turn to Isotope RX for that. There are other plugins that can do clipping, declipping, essentially. Won't get too deep into that, but we will definitely show you how I would kind of normalize the levels between different tracks. All right, next up from Dan. Another question, how do you set an audio level that is consistent with other videos on that platform? In some cases, I have YouTubers whose videos I have to crank my audio up because their audio levels are so low. We will cover that as well. In fact, DaVinci Resolve Fairlight has some really, really nice tools, loudness metering, that helps you achieve that. So we will definitely cover that as well. Graham says, if you buy a Yellowstone DVD and you set your TV or PlayStation 5 to normal sound levels, then the voice dialogue is totally suppressed and indistinguishable. How do you fix this? Well, Graham, I don't know if there's something wrong in the setup there. I would assume not, but generally, when you get a DVD or a Blu-ray, they're usually mastered with an assumption in mind, and that assumption is that you're going to be playing it back in an environment that isn't super noisy. It's not like you're on an airplane or in a car necessarily, or in a subway, anything like that. If you have a disc that you're playing back, the assumption is that you're probably playing it back at home, and that at home it's not horribly noisy in the space where you'll be listening to it, and you have pretty decent speakers as well, decent playback system. And therefore, they generally master to a lower loudness level, and they retain, as a result of that, they generally retain more dynamic range. So it's a practical choice, but it's also an artistic choice. So that's generally the reason. So I guess the fix really is turn your volume up if you can't hear it. And I wouldn't expect it to be the same loudness. I wouldn't expect that you leave the volume on your playback system at the same level for playing a video game or listening to videos online versus a DVD. I would expect that with a DVD or a Blu-ray, you'd have to turn it up. That's pretty normal. So I don't think anything's broken. They're just some assumptions that are made when someone's mastering the audio for playback on a disc. Okay. James asks, I wonder if you're planning to update the course in light of Blackmagic having published DaVinci Resolve 19.1. I know that updating a course like yours takes a lot of time and energy, but it would help to know your plans. James, yes, we are definitely planning to update it, but let me just say that the fundamentals of mixing in Fairlight course that we have out right now, 99% of that is still valid in version 19.1 because we're covering the fundamentals. Very, very little has changed in terms of what we cover in that course. So there's not really a lot to update. The biggest changes would be in a follow-on course where we go more in depth into some things, and we can start exploring some of the additional tools that have been added to DaVinci Resolve and Fairlight in the 19.1 version. So yes, there will be an update, but as of right now, the course is still very much, it's still very, very, very applicable to version 19.1. We don't use a lot of advanced features in that, so hopefully that helps. Okay, and then one final question here, I believe. Grant asks, how does DaVinci Resolve compare to other audio post-production software for professional voiceovers, such as Adobe Audition and Logic Pro? I would say that Fairlight was originally, at least as it's been integrated into DaVinci Resolve, my sense is that its primary focus is for video and for film post-production, but it can absolutely be used for voiceovers. In fact, I use it for that myself. So it's very capable. It can do, in fact, it can do more stuff than Adobe Audition can do. Adobe sadly seems to have just abandoned, not entirely abandoned Audition, but they're not really investing a lot in it. And there are some features in it that have been missing for a long time that lots of users have given feedback on, and they still haven't done anything. There's no layered track. There's no, the concept of layered track editing is not a thing in Adobe Audition, whereas both Logic and Fairlight have such a thing. That can be really, really useful when you're mixing a film or a video. It could be used for voiceover as well, actually, if you have multiple takes of the same thing. So it could be used for voiceovers. But I would say it's absolutely capable. I think the thing in the voiceover world, depending on what level you're working at, you have to take into consideration what the rest of the industry is using if you're going to be doing any sort of exchange of projects. So if you're the one that records the voiceovers, you do your own engineering, in essence, for your own recordings, then you just need to know what the post team is going to be using and what form they want their deliverables in. So if they just want a straight up WAV file, then yeah, you could absolutely use Resolve and export that as a WAV file, and then they can bring that into Logic, or it's actually Pro Tools is probably one that's more common. I would say Pro Tools is still at the top of the industry in terms of high budget films or larger budget, even larger budget commercials. Typically they're using Pro Tools in 2024 even. But you do see some of these others in other niches. I think you're going to see Adobe Audition. In corporate video, I find that Premiere Pro is still very much kind of the main nonlinear editor. And so if in corporate video, if they need to do a mix, they'll often use Adobe Audition. I still use Adobe Audition some for some of our corporate videos when we need to get a little bit more particular about our mix. Logic Pro seems most popular amongst musicians. So I haven't seen as much of that in the post-production world. So in any case, what I'm saying is DaVinci Resolve Fairlight is perfectly capable. And if it fits your workflow, by all means, I think it's a great choice. I would recommend the studio version. So I would recommend spending the $300 to get the studio version. I think it's worth every penny. And I bought mine in 2017 or something like that. And I haven't had to pay another dime since, which is great. Cannot say the same for Adobe Audition or for Pro Tools. You could say the same for Logic Pro. So anyway, hopefully that gets you some perspective, at least from my perspective, where we're at on that. Okay, those are the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Let's go ahead and switch on over. Actually, let's check in with the chat first and see if we have anything in the chat that we need to address before we jump into our demo. All right. Christopher says, DVD, Blu-ray, etc. are typically mastered to a target playback level of 80 dB. No? I don't. My sense is that they're probably mastered the same to the broadcast standards for television. So in Europe, with the R128, or I think you're going to typically see minus 24 LUFS. In the United States, minus 23 LKFS. Basically same measurement system, two different names. So I'm not sure. That's my guess. And so that is definitely much lower than most online video. Online video is typically going to be minus 14 for those that go by the streaming standards of YouTube or somewhere around there. So you can see there's a huge difference in terms of what's optimized for web playback versus television and or broadcast playback. Danny says, Friday I recorded VO with a PhD reading an important paper. Extensive editing will be required to remove false word starts, breaths, and even tummy grumbles. Is Isotope RX Advanced a useful tool? It's an indispensable tool in my work. We use it all the time at work. In fact, we do most of our work in RX on the original recorded material and then bring that over into Premiere and cut it after we've already sort of cleaned it up and mastered it. So that's how we approach it, because we're doing most of the things that we're doing in one take or one sitting, I should say. So we record the entire thing, and yeah, there are a bunch of false starts in there, and that'll get cut out in the edit eventually. But what we're looking to do is we can just clean that up instead of having to do this really heavy nonlinear editor or DAW kind of edit experience and mixing and mastering experience. We're actually doing that up front, because most of our education videos are between 60 seconds and 10 minutes maybe max once they're finished, total runtime. So it's a lot easier just to do it all at once. By the way, my beef with RX is copy protection. iLok specifically. Over the decades I've owned it. I've spent far more time fighting activation issues than using the product, not upgrading until fixed. That's interesting. I actually register mine to my computer, so I don't need iLok. I guess if you're switching between computers a lot, maybe that's why you're using iLok instead. That's the benefit of iLok in theory. But you can, for years now, you've been able to register it to that specific computer. And if you're using the same computer, then I haven't had any problems with that. Thomas, how would you treat MMH and like and aha sound louds by a person in a dialogue between two-person recorded with two channels? Would you isolate them and treat them like a normal spoken words? Well, it depends on the context. So if I'm doing a really special mix, something where I really want it to sound fantastic, I would isolate it. I would do what I call railroading. So for any time, say for example, I'm one of the presenters or I'm one of the talent in the video and Danny's the other. When I'm talking, I would cut out Danny's track, just slice it out entirely and remove it. And then when she's talking, vice versa. So that way I could isolate any of those, aha. And I would also make a choice there. So if it's not something I need the audience to hear necessarily, in other words, Danny's talking, but I insert a or a ah or something like that, sometimes that gets a little annoying. Some people have a tendency to do too much of that. And in those cases, sometimes I don't even bother inserting that in. I will just cut that out entirely from, if it's me saying the I would cut it out from my track. I wouldn't try to get it out of her track necessarily. It would just sound like, a little bit more natural. Like, yeah, somebody's saying but it sits much lower in her track. And so it's really, honestly, Thomas, it's an artistic decision. You get to choose how you want it to sound. So I would try both and see what works best for the piece. Live mixes too? I'm not sure the context of that question, but...
I think it was while you were answering one of the submitted ones.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. In a live mix, I would typically use auto mix if I had it available to me. A live mix of like a roundtable discussion type thing, I would use an auto mix to manage things. Okay, let's jump on into the demo. So let's go on over to DaVinci Resolve here. We're using version 19.1. And what we're going to do here, we're just doing straight up, let's just do voiceover. No video whatsoever. We're going to go ahead and just create a new project here. And I'm going to name it Demo 2 here. So we have no media. We're on the media tab here. I'm going to go ahead and grab a little something from the media tab here. We'll just get the audio from the video that went up on my main channel today. So we'll just grab that, drop it right in here. And there it is. What I typically do then is I need a timeline, of course. So I'll come over to the Edit tab and right-click in this area right here. This is basically the media pool. Right-click and choose Timelines, Create New Timeline. I just need a mono track because it's a mono dialogue track. So I'll just choose mono. And I just need one track, so we'll just leave it like that. And timeline 1 is just fine. We'll call it that. Then I'll head on over to the Fairlight tab. And now I can drag my audio clip right here into track number 1. And just so I can see the whole thing, I'll press Shift-Z, and that will kind of change the zoom level so that the entire track is showing within the window here. All right, now I don't need my media pool, so I can go ahead and collapse that, and I can maybe press Shift-Z again to normalize it to this window. Okay, so a few things. Now, some of the questions that came in ahead of time were, how do I manage my loudness, overall loudness? There were several questions about that, in fact. And so in DaVinci Resolve, we set our target loudness in the project settings. So we're going to come to File and go to Project Settings. And when I come over here into Fairlight, we have this target loudness setting right here. And by default, it's at -23 LUFS. We talked about this before. So depending on what your target is, where you're planning to post this audio, if it's going to be online or in a podcast, I would generally recommend something like -16 or -17. That's a personal choice. Some people say, oh, YouTube's target is -14, so I'm going to target that. That's fine if you want to do that. My sense is that for spoken word audio, to me, that often sounds a little bit overcompressed. And I prefer not to listen to that kind of audio too long. It's just kind of tiring to listen to. So I usually target -17, but that's up to you. For today on our live stream here, we're usually somewhere around -23. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at -23 here, just for the demonstration today. But if you're going for something online, you might want to target -16 or -17 for spoken word audio. If it's a video that's mostly spoken word audio, I would probably say -16 or 17. All right. Now, another question that came up is, hey, how do I, if I've got two audio tracks and they're vastly different levels, and in fact, we can actually do a demonstration here. If I bring that media pool back up, I can actually drag another instance of this same clip in here. And let's just say, whoops, not quite that much. What if you have this kind of situation where one of them is obviously a lot louder than the other one? Something like this. How do you level these? How do you get them kind of in the same range? What I would recommend is before you do any cutting, before you edit anything out, I would right-click on each track, go up to Normalize Audio Levels, and I would go ahead and target something like -20. Let's say for a mono track, I might go -26. Okay, we can leave the normalization mode at ITUR BS 1770-4. That's fine. I really just need, in terms of dB true peak, this is how much room do I leave at the top? How much room do I leave before it starts to clip? And in this case, I think -1.5 is about right. So we can do that. And there it is. It normalized that to that. Now I can do the same thing for this track. Right-click, normalize audio levels using the exact same settings. And look at that. Now they're a lot closer. And in fact, if we make these windows the same size, they look pretty much identical. So that's how you can, just as a start, as you're starting your mix, that's how you can get things in the same range so that you're not constantly fighting and like, oh, this one is so much louder than the other one. And especially once you've already done some of the edit, then you have to go back and change each cut. So if I were to cut, if I were going to come over here and maybe, let's see here, I'm going to cut there, and then I'm just going to put another cut here, and then I was going to get rid of that right there. Whoops, undo. There we go. If I go here and then cut there, and maybe I just wanted to get rid of this part right here. Now I got two things that I have to change the levels on. So definitely try to do that near the start before you've done a bunch of editing so that you don't have to take care of all that. So with that, let's get rid of this, and we'll just get rid of this track altogether here. We can delete that track. Okay, we're just going to work with this one here. So this is the audio from my the video that went up on our channel today, where we're just talking about the gear that we use. I might just bring that in here. What this is, this little header here is just me describing what this video is about. In fact, we can play that. Let's go and get our ears used to this audio. And we have sound speed. This is which audio gear do I really use for my YouTube videos, take 1. Okay, so in my case, since this was video, I did the clap, but let's just treat it as if it's just straight up voiceover for now. Okay. Undo, undo, undo. We got some cuts in there. I need to take care of that issue. Okay, we'll just get rid of this track here. There we go. All right, so what I can do is I can get this little symbol, move until I get this little symbol and just drag in. And that'll just get rid of that header, and I can then shove this to the left. And there we are, we're all set now. So this is where we actually start. For over 11 years now, we've been posting videos almost every week here to this channel, covering general video making things at first, but then it's sort of refined. Okay, so a few things you notice here. Pretty quiet, right? It's a little on the quiet side. Well, we're going to go ahead and do some of our other things that we want to do first in terms of cleaning up and sweetening the audio a little bit. And then we can come back and we're going to essentially master it or loudness normalize it at the end. So over here in our mixer, we have all the different things that we can use. We could use vocal or voice isolation if we needed to do that, sort of a, and I use air quotes here, an AI denoiser. We could also use a dialogue leveler, and this is basically kind of getting that. So when I talk, I have a tendency to be much louder at the start of my sentences and then get quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter as I go on. And then I start a new sentence and it's a much louder thing. And this is a pretty common thing that you'll encounter. And in fact, if I do a Shift Z here, we do have some spots in here that are pretty, that kind of stand out amongst the rest of them. Like here's a good example right there. So if I highlighted this section right here, it's a little bit louder than a lot of the other surrounding material. So first thing I might do is I'd actually come in and manually take care of those. And I'm going to show you how I do this because it is probably not the way everyone else does this. But for dialogue, I spend a lot of time in Isotope RX. And so I might come down here and just bring things over into Isotope RX because I can do things much more quickly there and take care of it. Now, don't worry, I'm going to come back. We'll spend some time in DaVinci Resolve as well. But what I would do is I would find those spots. So here, for example, is a great example. Let's just play that. And you can hear what that sounds like. I need to make sure that we're playing back. So you can hear. Here we go. Time. Also, my little setup here is... Okay, that one is... It's sticking out a little bit. This one is probably more extreme here. They last, also the audio gear lasts a lot longer than cameras. And so what I often do is I'll come in here, just highlight that portion. You could do this a few different ways. You could just get the gain module and drop it up to 3 dB. So if I just do that, boom, it drops it down by 3 dB. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is in the view, you can show clip gain, and then I could actually draw the automation in here like this. And then I can just pull this down however much I need to pull it down. So there are a couple different ways to approach it, but that's the general idea. So in essence, what I'm doing here is I'm kind of manually compressing the parts that are really sticking out. I'm going to make it difficult to do compression a little bit later on. So that's one example there. I might do that here as well. Let's just play this and see what I'm saying here. Which do I actually use? When I had given it a... Which do I actually use? So I might do a similar thing here. Just pull that down a touch. I find that if you go more than 3 dB, it becomes pretty obvious, but here's a playback now. Which do I actually use? When I had given it a choice. That sounds pretty decent. And now it's not sticking out so much. Another thing I might do before I go too heavily into this is what I might do is I might come in here and get my phase. You'll notice here we've got some asymmetry going on. So here's a great example of asymmetry. Notice that the peak here is at about minus, what, 8, and here it's at about minus 14. So we're missing some headroom that I'd like to have. For dialogue, I find that this adaptive phase rotation doesn't seem to affect the sound too much of dialogue. Musical instruments may be a different matter, but for dialogue, it generally doesn't color the sound, at least not too much, so I don't usually hesitate. Now, we can see here, we probably have a bit more headroom now. Waiting for this to read here. I'm using the loudness control module here. Now I have 8 dB of headroom, which is fantastic, so I've got some room to play with here. Go ahead and get rid of that. And now let's do this. Let's run through this pretty quickly. So here's another section where I get pretty gnarly. Move that over just a touch. Let's see what I'm saying here. Aperture sent it over to me. But if I were funding it myself, yeah, that but in particular is a little bit annoying. So I might just come in here. We can gain, just drop that by 3 dB. Probably the same here. I don't generally try to get too much of the silent portions in between because that starts to sound pretty obvious here, but here's how it sounds now. Aperture sent it over to me, but if I were funding it myself, a little more even, it's good. This looks like something a little bit standing out here. Cameras. We'll drop cameras. Okay. A little bit more in line. So, a lot of those kind of transition words, I tend to definitely speak up. I think that's probably most of it. Let's see what this is. Now, audio interfaces. Yeah, another transition. Just kind of a habit that I've developed. The audio interfaces will bring that down to like. Now, audio interfaces. So when okay, good. All right, so that's one of the first things I would do. Next, we don't need the clip gain anymore. Let's go and look at the spectral view and just see if we have any problems here. We're pretty clean actually on the bottom, but I might go ahead and just put a high pass filter in there anyway. I don't know that we need a lot of EQ here. The recording is pretty good. So I'm going to put a 70 hertz high pass filter there just to clean up some things underneath. We do have a little trace up above here at 21 kilohertz, probably not going to be an issue. We can put a low pass on there and set our low pass to about, yeah, 14 kilohertz is probably fine. Let me turn the high pass off and just clean that up a little bit. There we go. So we could do that. Don't see anything else that concerns me there. Haven't heard anything that concerns me so far, so this is where we're at. There are just a lot more complications there. And then transmitting wirelessly also adds additional. Okay, so aside from being a little bit on the quiet side, I think things are pretty good there. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now when we pop back over to Resolve, we should have nothing. Why do we have nothing? Is it just an issue of drawing waveforms? Let's switch back. Okay, DaVinci Resolve. Throwing the curveballs at us here. Here we go. Oh, interesting. What the heck is going on? Are we doing layered work here? So we're going to go to Timeline. Actually, let's go to View. Let's show the track layers. Shift Z. I don't know. Something broke in between there. In any case, in the interest of time, whoops, let's undo that. Let's just go ahead and drag this other layer back up. Okay, so that's just a demo of how I would normally have done it in RX. Let's go ahead and take a pause here, and let's go check in with the chat, make sure we haven't lost anybody. 19.1 for me doesn't work with external audio editor. Marcus, it doesn't come back. Okay. Now, Here's a good example. This used to work. Used to work fine in 17, worked fine in 18, worked fine, I think, in 19.0. I'm not going to spend time troubleshooting it here, but beware. This is an example of part of the reason I'm not 100% into this yet. I still am doing a lot of my work in RX and then bring it into the video editing app. But if I were doing a film, I would need to do it this way instead. So in any case, we'll make sure that Blackmagic Design is aware of that issue. Okay, anything else in the chat there that we need to check in on? Okay, here we go. Danny, I use multiple Tentacle Sync Track E recorders to capture ISO tracks on talent as they interact in walk and talks. What's the best way to do a Dugan type auto mix in post? Well, there is an app called WT Auto Mixer, Danny, that does not use the exact same algorithm that Dugan does, but that's one option. So that does, at least in previous versions of Fairlight, that worked in Fairlight. I would check that out. At this point, I believe Shure owns WT Auto Mixer. It used to be a different company, but Shure bought them. So that's the first thing I would look at. If you have a field mixer that has Dugan Auto Mixing in it, you could feed the audio through that mixer and have it make an auto mix for you. So if you've got a Sound Devices 833 or 888 or Scorpio, then you could run it through that. Just play it back, and it'll make the auto mix for you. We've done that before. Those are probably the two main ways. The other way, of course, is the good old-fashioned railroading, where you cut out the portions, so you put both of the tracks in your timeline. When this person is talking, you cut out this person's track, that part of their track. When this person is talking, you cut out this person's part of the track, and then you put fades in between each of those cuts so that it fades clearly. And of course, you may need some room tone to keep things consistent throughout. So that's the manual way of doing it. But for an automated way, WT Auto Mixer is probably the first thing I'd look at. All right, Grant, excellent help from the Judmeister. Thank you so much, and thank you, Grant, for your question earlier today. I appreciate that so much. By the way, the today uploaded video was good. Congratulations. Thank you, DaVinci Girl. Appreciate that. I do have a note. I'll come back to that after we answer your questions here. Instead of isolating different dialogue tracks, I have much better results with aligning the tracks with auto-align post 2 and level them only a little. So Udo brings up a good point. That is another way you can do it. So the trick is that when you have two people talking in the same space, each on their own microphone at some distance from each other, you will get phase differences between, well, you'll get the audio will not be perfectly aligned between the two microphones because there is distance between them. So when I talk, my microphone captures my sound, and Danny's microphone also captures my sound. My voice is going to arrive later at her mic than it does at my mic, so they're not going to be perfectly aligned. So auto-align post 2 will take them and line them back up dynamically and allow you so that you don't have to do the railroading necessarily. I still like to do the railroading because sometimes if I'm doing something really special, because it can still sound kind of roomy if you don't cut out some of the other mics, but on the other hand, it could also sound more natural. So it just depends. You have to make a choice there. But yes, Udo, that's a great point, and I think a perfectly fine approach. When you have the clap in the beginning, will the normalization take this into account? It will, but it's a transient, so it's not an overwhelmingly, it doesn't overwhelmingly affect the overall levels, the overall loudness measurement. It is because it just happens so quickly. So it's not something you need to worry about when you're talking about program loudness, which is LUFS or LKFS. Hopefully that makes sense. The reason why, let me explain just very briefly. LUFS and LKFS is intelligent from the standpoint that it doesn't allow momentary loudness to overwhelmingly affect the overall measurement. That was a problem with, if you look, for example, at peak levels, you could say this audio peaks at minus 0.2 dB full scale. And the problem with that is that that was only at one point in the entire piece for a fraction of a second. And the rest of it might be recorded where the peak levels, if you discount that one peak level, All the other rest of the peak levels may be somewhere around minus, I don't know, 20. That's going to be, in terms of perceived loudness, that's going to be a very quiet recording. So what LUFS does is it doesn't allow any momentary loudness to overwhelmingly influence the overall measurement of perceived loudness. Also, when audio levels drop below a certain point, it gates those out, so it doesn't count those in the measurement of loudness as well. So it's a little bit more intelligent that way. So you don't have to worry so much about momentary high amplitude things affecting the overall loudness measurement. It will affect normalization if, good point actually. You may be asking this, and I may have missed this earlier. If I were to do this whole thing where if we go back into Resolve here, if I do this thing here where I normalize the audio levels, if I hadn't taken that one out already, let's actually just bring it back. Okay, so now I brought it back. Let's just analyze the audio levels. It says my true peak is minus 1.5 dB full scale. So, and we're sitting at minus 33. So if I try to normalize it now to minus 26, boom, it doesn't, it can't, it doesn't have enough headroom. So yes, to answer your question, it will affect the normalization, and that's a good reason to get rid of it before you do that. So now when I come to normalize it, after I've cut that part out, it will actually normalize it because it has the headroom to do it. So this normalize feature within DaVinci Resolve is intelligent enough to know, hey, if it's going to result in clipping, I'm not going to boost it. It'll only boost it so far as it can without clipping the audio. So yes, Bram, good catch. Christopher, all these edits you're doing, you've destroyed the time code alignment of the resulting audio clip. How do you manage to bring it back to the video? So first of all, I'm assuming something here, Christopher, you're a good point. If you are time code aligning, you need to do that first and then put everything in the timeline and then do all the things that we're doing here. So I'm just doing what I would consider just a voiceover with no video, and I can do all these things without worrying about that. So yes, you would want to do the time code syncing first and then do all this editing here. This is where a Stream Deck comes in handy. With keys programmed, really speeds up the process. Indeed, this is a great use case for a Stream Deck, not a Steam Deck. Steam Deck's for playing games. 1, take care of transients. 2, address extreme frequencies. Yep, I think that's fair to say, Linda. That's how I generally approach it. So I'll usually do a high-pass filter for sure, possibly a low-pass filter, take care of transients. That's where we're at so far. Yes. Side note, long-time fan of your channel, my friend. Marcus, thank you so much. Thanks for coming by today. Gnarly is the new awesome. Well, actually, gnarly with a G at the start, Grant. Gnarly is actually a very old term I picked up from my surfing friends when I was a kid in Southern California. So gnarly generally refers to, like, a gnarly wave is a wave that's just kind of brutal. Or don't get too gnarly means don't go too, like if you're driving, don't go too fast around the corners or go too fast in general. That's what gnarly typically means. Sorry, and thanks. There's the translation. Hopefully that helps. All right. Doing checkerboard editing, is that to avoid phasing issues between tracks? In part, but it's also to clean up the overall sound so that you don't have two separate microphones contributing room noise at any given time. You just have one capturing room noise. So that's kind of the traditional approach for that checkerboard editing, or railroading, as some people call it. It's just to keep to avoid the phasing issues first, yes, but also to just keep things cleaner. The overall dialogue. All right, the delivery doctor. Thanks for the answers, Curtis. I'll have to do a couple of reviews here, but the instructions you gave me were very clear. Glad to hear it. Glad it helps. Are we best to stick with 18.x for now? I would have thought that since we're out of beta, we wouldn't be experiencing this level of problem, but evidently we are. So maybe so, maybe yes. And this is Dan M. Hi, Dan. Yes, we got it. I think we got that from your profile picture. So Yeah, I think maybe if you want to be safe, if you're still on 18.x, it might be a good idea to stay there. When aligning the clapperboard audio with a picture, do you line up the point where the sticks meet with the point before the audio transient or after the transient? Well, as much as possible on the transient, but if they don't perfectly align, just whichever is closest is what I typically do. Bram, thanks for the great explanation on the LUFS and normalization. You bet. Thanks for catching the fact that in DaVinci Resolve it would catch that. So, okay, let's go on back to this. I'm going to start over with this audio clip, by the way. What is this one? Let's go. Oh, here's the RX one. It did actually save it. It just didn't insert it for whatever reason. So here we do have our, wonderful. There's our stuff that we did already in RX, I think. Let's just compare it just to make sure. See if it looks any different. On the bottom is the original, and on the top is the RX version. Part of what we need to do is basically time align them as much as we can. Why am I not able to do that? Here we go. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it looks like this one's a little bit more managed. Okay, cool. Well, we did get the RX. You just have to manually drop it in. So here we go. Manually dropped in. Okay, cool. So what are some of the other things? Breaths are another thing. So once you start boosting the levels, the breaths start sticking way out, and especially after you've done some compression. So if you're taking the audio here, let's just zoom in a bit. All right, it's a little bit harder to see it here. I always find it a little easier to see it on RX, but there are these breaths in between. There's a breath right here. We zoom in. There's a breath. And right now, it's not too egregious. If I play back, boom microphone right here. And that microphone came. Okay, not a big deal, but if let's just check to see where we're at here. Let's again analyze our audio levels right now. We're at minus 33 with 9 dB of headroom, so we should be able to get to minus 26 without a problem. So let's just, let's right click, normalize, and let's go to minus 26. Look at that breath now, and let's listen to it. Boom microphone right here. And that microphone came out, I believe, in the... Okay, standing out a little bit more. Here's another. For a long, long time. Okay. So that's another thing that I don't usually want a lot of that going on. So I'm going to come over here to effects, and we are going to go to, in my case, we're going to have restoration, and we'll go grab our RX11 breath control. Let's just kind of play with this a little bit and see if we can get this dialed in here. So zoom out a little bit. Let's go find a big gnarly breath, as we say. That one's not bad. This one's pretty intense here. So let's just highlight this section right there, and let's put it on repeat play. And as it's playing, I'm going to go ahead and dial in our breath control. Here we go. Here. And that microphone came out. 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 Okay, we could stop there. Robotic. But that's how we can use the breath control. Now the breath control, don't always use it. Sometimes it's a little tricky because it got that breath okay, but let's try it on this breath over here. So if I come over here and highlight, whoops. Let's make this a little smaller so I can highlight just what I need here. There's that there. Let's play that back and see what we get here. And it's still a great time. 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 And okay. it caught that one pretty nicely too. If we maybe, it's not always perfect, but we're actually getting pretty good results. So we're going to go ahead and stick with it. So that's how we do breath control, and that's especially going to be important as we. And in fact, I would actually change that. Let me go back and get that. I oftentimes target that for about, minus 55 is not bad. It could be pretty good to manage things. Let's play through it again. So that calls into question YouTube stuff. Honestly, I'm a little tired of gear. I have.
What?
That calls into question again. Why? Why are you doing this YouTube stuff? Honestly, I'm a little tired of. Okay, playing another one. Let's play these two over here, which are less prominent.
Wait,
Gear reviewer. Are you talking?
Yeah, we need to loop that more. I'm a little tired of gear.
Okay. I'll explain that later. You need to watch my videos. Okay, we're going to play a little bit more through these sections. These are smaller breaths. Let's see what happens. Piles of stuff around here. As a gear reviewer, we've got so many things that I can choose. That was a good example. Did you hear what it did to that breath? Listen carefully. Let's play it again. Of stuff around here. As a gear reviewer, we've got so many things that I can. It didn't catch the whole thing. And that's pretty common. That's why a lot of times, like if I need to do something quick and dirty, fine, I can use this. But if I want to do something really nice, I'm going to go in and manually manage those breaths, and I'll take it into RX to take care of those. So I'll literally just highlight, just like we did with the parts that were sticking out too much in terms of dynamics, things that had really high amplitude relative to everything else. I would do the same things with the breaths. I'd highlight the breath and actually pull the overall gain down. Depending on the breath, maybe 3 dB. Sometimes I have to go as much as 9 dB to really kind of manage it if it's a really kind of breath. So that's one of the tricky things here. And I've, maybe as other people are better at setting that, but I have tweaked those things what feels like all day long, and still they're going to miss some situations. So unless you have someone who has really consistent breaths, can be tricky. All right. What else are we going to do? So we might have some S problem. Let's check and see. Some sibilance. Question again, why? Why are you doing this YouTube stuff? Honestly, I'm a little tired of gear. I have what I need. I've got piles of stuff around here. As a gear reviewer, we've got so many things that I can choose from to use when I make my. Whoops, a little bit of sibilance. I believe there is a sibilance. Is there a de-esser? There is a de-esser here. So let's just go ahead and drop this in. Let's use the built-in one. All right. We'll play starting here. Honestly, I'm a little tired of gear. I have what I need. I've got piles of stuff around here. As a gear reviewer, we've got so many things that I can choose from to use when I make my YouTube videos here. So the question is, which do I actually use? When I had given a choice and I have all these options in front of me, which ones do I actually find myself going back to over and over and over again? And this is specifically for the YouTube video production. For my professional work, that's kind of a different story, although there's a good bit of overlap. But let me just kind of cover what some of those things are. And the reason I'm doing this is not to brag or show off and say, hey, look how cool I am with all my cool gear. It's more of a, hey, here's some perspective for someone who's been doing this for 11 years. Here are the things that I don't really end up using that much, and here are the things. Okay, we'll call it there for now. What we're trying to do is just take the edge off the S's there. So if you go too far, you saw when we cranked it up, or you heard when we cranked it up, I started to sound like I had a lisp. You don't want to go that far, obviously. So what you can do is crank it up just to find the frequency. And I know that in my voice, it's often around between 5 and 5,500 Kelvin, or not Kelvin, 5,500 K on the frequency. 5 and 5.5K, excuse me, having trouble with words today. But then when we were watching the reduction, somewhere between, 0 and I would say minus 5 dB max on the reduction is just enough to take the edge off, usually hitting somewhere, when there is an S, somewhere around minus 2 or 3, somewhere in there. So that's our de-esser. That's quite lovely. All right, let's pause. We've been going for a little bit. Let's pause and see what's going on in the chat. If there's anything that I'm missing, Anything that is leaving people confused. We don't want to lose anybody. What do I got over here? What's this on the... Oh. I don't know what that is. Oh, it's this. Okay. All right. I just saw in the picture you're seeing the control surface a little bit. All right, Danny's scouring here. Marcus says, I have yet to find a deep breath plugin that I would trust. It can only get 80% at best. I completely agree, Marcus. I have not found one that is completely trustworthy. Now, again, quick and dirty, yeah, fine. But if you need something more than that. Geek Homeworld, in a live stream, how can I fight microphone bleed with someone in my studio? What are best practices using my Rodecaster Pro original version and M8 CSR, Sennheiser, MKH416, and MKH50? Okay. Use the polar patterns to help you. So position the microphones and the people. So first of all, get people a little farther away if you can. Position their microphones so that the polar pattern is helping you, so that the parts of the microphone that are least sensitive, say for example my microphone, the part that's least sensitive on the back or off to one side is positioned so that that's facing the other person in the room. So you're using your microphone's polar patterns to help reduce the pickup of the other person, if that makes sense. So that's another thing you can do. Now the trick is with the MKH416 and the MKH50, those are both either supercardioid or, in the case of the Sennheiser, it might be described as low bar. I'm not sure, but it does have some pickup on the back. So the least sensitive part is actually probably not at the exact back of the microphone, but take a look at the polar pattern and you'll see there's a point at which it picks up the least amount of noise. And that's the part of the back of the microphone that should probably be aimed at the other person in the room. So that's one thing. Spacing people apart a little bit more helps quite a bit as well. Those are the main things. I would also say, of course, any sort of acoustic treatment you can do, even if it's temporary, like blankets to help mellow the sound from bouncing off of all the hard surfaces, that can help quite a bit as well. So hopefully it helps Geek Homeworld. All right, from Udo, I normally set the RX spectrogram frequency scale to extended log. Do you know of any reasons to work in linear or any other frequency scale? Mine's usually at the standard, I believe, is log, is a logarithmic scale. I don't know why one would want to work at linear. The dB scale is logarithmic by its very nature. So I've just, whenever I've looked at them, I've always looked at them from a log perspective. So I don't know of any other reasons, Udo, to work in linear. Maybe somebody else has, there may be use cases for it. Danny is basically waving at me saying, shh, that's enough. Number 3, address breaths manually, correct? de-ess, yep. Linda, you're right on. Find the freak, yep. Find the frequency. Find the frequency where the S is most prominent. And the way to do that is to turn the de-esser way up in terms of its effect, and then sweep the frequency around until you find it. And what'll happen is when you hear the word S, you should see a ton of attenuation. You should see it absolutely the de-esser clamping way hard down, and the S will start to sound like a lisp. So instead of Barcelona, it would be Barcelona, as an example. 5500 Kelvin, wow, you're hot, LOL. Thank you, Matt. Tripping on words, it happens. Thomas Durfee says, if you spoke for an hour and you get quieter over time, when would you rather even out the loudness with the envelope tool? Normalize segments separately, compress, or leave as is? Oh, no, that's where I would actually automate. I would get I would automate it. I'd play through it, and as the person slowly gets quieter, slowly increase the fader. Just a little bit is what I would do. And I would do that for each track. That's where a control surface comes in real handy. So you can automate all the tracks, have a fader for each person. And as you're playing, you can be adjusting them at the overall level. So as they get quieter and quieter and quieter over the course of an hour, you're boosting those faders up a little bit as time goes on. So it becomes kind of transparent that way. And then I would do all the other things, the compression, blah, 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 blah. All right. Nikki Knocky Knacky New. Helpful session, Curtis. Slightly off topic, but have you ever or would you ever decide to use a microphone plugin to modify the track in post as distinct from using well-known editing packages? Let me see if I understand that. Do you decide to use a microphone plugin to modify the track in post as distinct from using well-known editing packages? Not sure I understand the question, Nikki Knocky Knacky New. I wonder if you could clarify that just a little bit. Yeah, let's try that. Marcus, I use the focus mode cursor in Fairlight 100% of the time. It's the closest to Pro Tools clip gain, which I'm used to. I debreath manually in real time and also pull down my peaks on the fly. So if we take a look back over here at the Mac, I assume that's this tool here, Marcus, where you can highlight something, and then there's a way that you can use it to also grab. Yeah, this makes sense. This is very Pro Tools-esque. But yeah, you could do that to manage your gain. And then I don't know if you would do it. Yeah, there you go. So it's doing the clip gain there, so I could drop it by 3 dB just like that. See how we did that? That's a good way to do the automation. Nice tip. Thank you, Marcus. You're spending more time in Fairlight than I am. That's a good idea. Like that. All right. What? I'm not sure. I apologize. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but thank you for sharing your knowledge all these years. It's one of the reasons why YouTube is such a wonderful resource for audiovisual creatives like me. All the best from Amsterdam. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And hello. It's good to meet my grandmother's from Rotterdam, actually. So good to meet a fellow Dutch person. Ah, here we go from Nikki. To make the sound recorded on a microphone sound like a different microphone. Example, Neumann. Oh, you mean like the modeling microphones? There are modeling microphones that you can use that have plugins, basically something that makes them sound like different classic microphones. Yeah, you could certainly do that. The tests that I've heard are pretty good. They're not perfect. They're not perfect matches, but they're pretty good. So if you wanted to get that Neumann sound, you could certainly do that. Just using an EQ curve, like a prepackaged preset EQ, I don't think would work because it depends on so many other factors. But yeah, one of the modeling microphones in their plugin. Yeah, sure, I'd consider using it.
Last call for questions. We have time for like 2 more.
Last call for questions. My goodness, we didn't even get halfway through what I wanted to cover, but we have time for a couple more questions. If you put at Curtis Judd Audio, Danny will pick those up and we'll bring those here into the chat. And we'll answer what we can. So we're just getting started. Obviously, we're going to need to spend a lot more time on this. Christopher says, I assume the mic plugin refers to some of the virtual mic emulations to get the sound of classic microphones. That makes sense now. Christopher, thank you. Talk softly and carry a big DBX 280 success. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, that's not a bad choice. DBX 286S is a useful tool. Absolutely. Good way to even things out and make things a little easier for yourself in post if that's the kind of workflow you need. Really helpful. Thank you. And thank you. And also thanks for delighting us with your online persona name here, Nikki Knocky Knacky New. That's quite delightful. Marcus, I'm cutting all my videos in Resolve Studio. The main reason was, being a sound guy, Fairlight is incredible. The only thing missing for me is ARA support. So yeah, I agree. That would be really nice. ARA support, for those that are not aware, is something that's used in other digital audio workstations that allows you to essentially do editing like you would do in round tripping to RX and then coming back, but without having to leave the actual host application. So Pro Tools has it. I believe Logic supports it as well. So it's a really nice technology that's be really cool to see this in Fairlight as well. I agree, Marcus. Linda is just trying to create a consistent workflow. Thanks. I agree. Having a consistent workflow makes it so much easier. It's good plan. I'm headed that direction too. Walking down that same road. All right, friends, we're going to have to pick up and do more of this in next week's, possibly. I'm also working on, Mackie sent over some affordable reference/pleasure listening monitors, which sounds weird. Mackie has been making monitors for near-field monitors for years and years and years. I remember the first set of monitors I used were the Mackie. I don't remember the model number. We'll talk about it when we cover these new ones. But Carrie, my brother, used these Mackie monitors. They were amazing. So they've been making, and loudspeakers, they've been making those for years as well. So they have this new third generation CR series of monitors, which are their very, very affordable ones. So these are 5-inch drivers for the two speakers, the two near field monitors. It's $200, which is like, what? That's really cheap. So the question is, how useful are they as reference monitors? And they also have a mode where you can put it for pleasure listening. So they have Bluetooth and you can listen to, music and stuff for pleasure, but you can also switch it to reference mode or work mode, which is supposed to be a little bit more linear. So we're going to do some measurements. I had to order some custom cables to get that all set up and do some measurements through my IK Multimedia Arc Studio. So using a reference microphone to measure the response of the room played through these other monitors. So we'll be back with that, and I probably won't get to it this next week. So we'll probably come back to working in Fairlight again next week and finish this whole job up. So in the meantime, get out there and make some great sound, and we will talk to you all again very soon. Take care, everybody.